A rich and famous man pretends to be poor to see who will love him for his heart, not his money. Many women reject or ignore him, but a kind plus-size woman shares her food, time, and genuine care. She alone passes his test, proving true love sees character, not wealth or body size. You'd think a man with the world at his feet would never feel alone. But the night everything changed for Keanu Reeves, he was surrounded by lights, cameras, and people, and still felt completely invisible. He stepped out of the black car onto the red carpet, fans screaming his name, flashes exploding like tiny thunderstorms. His latest movie poster towered over the street, his own face 30 feet high with a gun in one hand and fire behind him. The crowd loved that version of him, invincible, dangerous, untouchable. As he smiled and waved, letting security guide him forward, a quiet ache settled under his ribs. Every hand reaching for him wanted a selfie, an autograph, a story to post. Not one of them knew how he laughed when he burned his toast, or how he talked to his plants in the kitchen at 3 a.m. just the image. Never the man. Hours later, the after-party glowed with soft golden light and expensive perfume, but the conversations felt colder than the ice in his glass. A model in a glittering silver dress leaned close, laughing too loudly at a joke he hadn't finished. "Keanu, you have to take me on your jet next time," she said, tapping his chest with one perfectly manicured finger. "Economy seats are killing my back." He watched her talk about followers and brands and how dating him had doubled her engagement. She never asked how he was, not once. When his phone buzzed with a message from his sister asking if he'd eaten something real today, the contrast hit him so hard his throat tightened. He excused himself, leaving the model mid-sentence, and no one at the table even noticed he was gone. In the dim quiet of the underground parking garage, he finally exhaled. His driver, Miguel, an older man with kind eyes and a belly that spoke of too many late-night tacos, opened the door for him. "Long night, boss?" Miguel asked as Keanu slid into the back seat. The car pulled away from the chaos, city lights smearing across the tinted windows. Keanu loosened his tie, staring at his reflection in the glass, the famous face everyone knew and nobody really touched. "Miguel," he said softly, "have you ever wondered if people like you only because they think you can give them something?" Miguel chuckled once, then realized Keanu was serious. The laughter died in his throat. "Sir, people like me don't have that problem," he said. "But I've seen a lot. When someone's pockets are full, it's hard to know if their heart is." The words sat between them, heavy and simple. Keanu rubbed his hands together, the calluses from stunt training scratching against his palms. "I keep meeting women who say they love me," he murmured, "but they've already fallen in love with the posters, the interviews, the money. They love the story, not the person living it." Miguel drove in silence for a while, then cleared his throat. "Then don't show them the story," he said. "Hide the money, hide the fame. If someone still stays, maybe that's the one." The idea sounded crazy and obvious at the same time, and once it entered Keanu's mind, it refused to leave. He stared at the city outside, the same city where people slept under cardboard while billboards with his face shone through the night, and something in him shifted. If he wanted a love that was real, he would have to risk being seen without the armor. The plan started as a joke the next morning over black coffee and no sleep. "You're telling me," his lawyer said, pinching the bridge of his nose, "that you want to vanish for a while and pretend to be broke?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Not vanish, just step out of the bubble a month, maybe more. You move my money somewhere safe. Miguel keeps my phone. I take some cash, just enough to survive. No assistants, no bodyguards, no designer anything." His lawyer listed 10 reasons why it was a terrible idea. Miguel added 5 more. But beneath the worry, they both saw the look in Keanu's eyes, a stubborn mix of exhaustion and hope. Finally, Miguel sighed. "If you're going to do this, at least let me help you not get mugged on day one." That afternoon, a discreet makeup artist came to his house, thrilled by the role. They cut his hair unevenly, darkened his teeth a little, added faint scars along his jaw. He traded $1,000 shoes for worn-out sneakers and a faded army jacket that smelled faintly of dust and rain. When he looked in the mirror, a stranger stared back, still him, but softened, roughened, almost invisible. His first day as nobody was nothing like the movies. He checked into a cheap room under a simple name, Kai, and every creak in the hallway made him instinctively reach for security that wasn't there. He spent the morning walking through streets he had only ever driven past, cracked sidewalks, tiny grocery stores, laundromats with flickering lights. With no entourage clearing a path, he was jostled, bumped, ignored. A taxi splashed dirty water onto his jeans and never slowed down. When a teenager on a scooter almost clipped a small boy on the crosswalk, Keanu's instincts kicked in. He lunged forward, grabbing the kid's backpack and yanking him back just in time. The scooter skidded, the rider swore, and the boy's mother rushed over, pulling her son away from Keanu. "Don't touch him," she snapped, eyeing his filthy jacket, not seeing the man she'd once screamed for at a movie premiere. She dragged the child off without a thank you, leaving Keanu standing in the middle of the crosswalk, heart hammering, hands shaking. By late afternoon, his feet ached, his stomach growled, and the freedom he'd imagined felt heavier than any red carpet suit. No one asked for a photo. No one asked how he was. He was just another tired man on a city bench, watching people hurry past with their own invisible burdens. For the first time, he understood on a physical level how easy it was to look away from someone who seemed to have nothing to offer. As he sat under the shade of an old tree in a small park, the smell of warm bread drifted toward him. He turned his head and saw her sit down at the other end of the bench. A woman in a faded pink dress with tiny flowers printed on it, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was plus size, her grocery bag digging a red line into her wrist, her shoulders slightly hunched like someone who had grown used to taking up too much space in other people's eyes. She opened a simple sandwich wrapped in paper, glanced at him once, then again, her gaze catching the hunger he tried to hide. He looked away quickly, embarrassed, but his stomach betrayed him with a loud, traitorous growl. Her lips twitched, not in mockery, but in something like understanding. She hesitated for a long moment, as if arguing with a harsh voice only she could hear, then sighed and broke the sandwich in half. Sliding closer, she held out the bigger piece to him, her hand trembling just a little. "You look like you need this more than I do," she said gently. Keanu lifted his eyes to hers, and in that instant, before he could thank her, before he could decide whether to accept, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A kindness that wanted nothing from him because it had no idea who he really was. Her hand stayed there between them, offering the bigger half of the sandwich, and for a second he almost refused out of pride. Years of never needing anything from strangers made the gesture feel almost dangerous. But his stomach cramped again, and something in her eyes, tired, gentle, a little shy, told him this wasn't about charity. It was about connection. He took the bread carefully, like it was made of thin glass. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "I haven't eaten today." She smiled, small but real. "Then don't waste time talking. Eat before I change my mind." They sat in a quiet bubble on that park bench while the city moved around them. The bread was soft and still warm. It tasted better than most of the expensive meals he'd had in five-star hotels. He tried not to devour it, aware of her watching from the corner of her eye. "I'm Rosa," she said finally, wiping her fingers on a napkin. "I work at the hospital cafeteria down the street, and before you say it, yes, I know it's ironic." She patted her stomach with a wry twist of her mouth. "The fat lady who lives around food." She tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked halfway. Keanu frowned. "I wasn't thinking that," he said quietly. "I was thinking you're the first person today who's looked at me like I'm not trash." Her gaze snapped to his, confusion softening into something like understanding. "People see what they want to see," she murmured. "Sometimes they decide you're not worth kindness before you even open your mouth." He told her his name was Kai and gave her a half-truth about being between jobs, which was exactly a lie. He had turned down 3 scripts to do this. She didn't press him for details or ask what he used to do. Instead, she asked if he had somewhere to sleep, if he was safe at night, if anyone was waiting for him. Simple questions, but no one had asked him those in years without a contract attached. When he admitted he was staying in a small room near the industrial district, she winced. "Rough neighborhood, lots of noise, not much sleep," he chuckled. "I've shot movies with explosions, I'll be fine." The word movies almost slipped out too easily. He swallowed the rest, heart jumping. She didn't seem to notice, already digging in her grocery bag for a bottle of water. "Drink," she ordered. "You look dehydrated." When he joked, "Are you always this bossy with strangers?" she shot back. "Only the ones who look like they haven't had a good day in a long time." A group of teenagers drifted past them, loud and restless, skateboards clacking on the pavement. One of them glanced over, smirked, and elbowed his friend. "Yo, check it out," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Big girl feeding her homeless boyfriend, that's charity goals, man." The others laughed, ugly and sharp. Rosa's shoulders stiffened. She stared straight ahead, jaw clenching. Keanu felt his pulse slam in his ears. Something in him, honed by years of stunt training and choreographed violence, surged forward, but this wasn't a film set and there were no cameras. He set his sandwich down carefully, stood and faced the boys. "Hey," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "You don't talk to her like that," the leader scoffed. "Relax, Grandpa, we're just joking." Keanu took a step closer, his gaze steady, unblinking. "You think that's a joke? Try saying it about your own mother and see if it's still funny." The air shifted. The boy opened his mouth, then closed it again, something uncertain flickering in his eyes. One by one, their smirks faded. They muttered curses under their breath and rolled away, wheels rattling over cracked concrete. When he sat back down, Rosa's eyes were shiny. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I'm used to it." He shook his head. "That's the problem, you shouldn't have to be." She let out a long breath she seemed to have been holding for years. "People always think they have the right to comment on my body," she said, voice low. "Doctors, strangers, my own family, it's like they forget there's a person attached." She sniffled once, then forced a smile. "Anyway, you survived my cooking and defended my honor. That officially earns you an invitation." He raised an eyebrow. "To what?" "The shelter," she said. "I help out there after my shift. We serve dinner, play with the kids, could use an extra pair of hands, unless, you know, you're busy being mysterious in the park." He almost said no out of instinct. His team would lose their minds if they knew he was walking into crowded places without protection. But the idea of seeing her in her world, watching how she moved when she wasn't apologizing for her existence, pulled at him. "I'll come," he said, "if you're sure." Her face lit up, transforming her features completely. "I'm sure. Come on, it's just 2 bus stops away." As they crossed the street together, he felt oddly lighter, like he'd stepped out of another movie and into a different genre altogether. Then Rosa slowed, her gaze snagging on something ahead. A bus shelter stood on the corner, its glass smeared with fingerprints and old stickers. Behind them, glowing in bold letters, was a poster for his latest film. His own face staring back, bruised and intense, his name in huge white font above it. Rosa's eyes flicked from the poster to his real face, taking in the same eyes, the same jawline hiding under stubble and grime. Her steps faltered. He felt his heartbeat slam against his ribs as she looked at him more closely than anyone had all day, her brows knitting together, her lips parting as if a name was climbing up her throat. For one long, suspended moment, she simply stared at him, then at the larger-than-life version on the glass. The city noise faded, leaving only the sound of his own pulse roaring in his ears. If she recognized him now, the experiment would be over before it truly began. Rosa squinted, leaned closer to the poster, and snorted. "Hollywood," she muttered. "They always make the guys look so angry and mysterious, like they've never had to wait for a bus in the rain." She shook her head and turned away, her suspicion evaporating before it fully formed. "Come on, Kai, we're gonna miss it." He exhaled so quietly she didn't hear, caught between relief and an unexpected sting. He'd spent decades being recognized everywhere. Now, when he actually needed to be anonymous, it almost hurt that she didn't see him at all. On the bus, Rosa moved with the tired grace of someone who'd done this trip 1,000 times. She slid her card, then turned when he hesitated by the machine, patting his pockets like he'd lost something. "I haven't used one of these in a while," he admitted. The driver's narrowed eyes said he'd heard that excuse before. Rosa stepped in without missing a beat, tapping twice. "One for him," she said, "and no, he's not scamming you, he's just hopeless." They found 2 seats near the back. As the bus rattled forward, he watched her reflection in the scratched window. Her gaze followed the passing streets, the cheap clothing stores, the pawn shops, the line outside a free clinic. She saw all of it, not with bitterness, but with a kind of soft, aching familiarity. "You ride this route every day?" he asked. "Twice," she said. "Hospital in the morning, shelter in the evening. My mom says I should rest more, but—" She shrugged. "Rest doesn't feed people." The shelter was a worn brick building squeezed between a mechanic's garage and a discount furniture store. The paint peeled around the windows, but someone had taken time to plant marigolds in cracked pots by the door. Inside, the air smelled of soap, tomato sauce, and something sweet baking in an oven that had seen better days. Children's drawings covered the walls. Crooked houses, stick-figure families, sons with too many rays. The chaos hit him all at once. Kids chasing each other, an elderly man arguing cheerfully with a volunteer about how much pepper to put in the stew, a baby wailing somewhere in the back. Rosa seemed to grow taller as she stepped inside, shoulders squaring, steps quick and sure. Here no one looked twice at her size, they just called her name with relief. "Rosa, you're late!" A thin woman in a hairnet shouted from the kitchen. "The meatballs are rebelling." "Incoming reinforcement," Rosa said, jerking her head toward him. "This is Kai, he's helping today." The staff barely paused long enough to nod. They were too busy to care who he was or where he came from. It startled him how freeing that felt. No one asked for a photo. No one whispered his name. Someone thrust an apron into his hands, and within minutes he was rolling up his sleeves at the industrial sink, shoulder to shoulder with Rosa, washing trays and laughing as bubbles climbed up his forearms. She moved quickly, efficiently, giving quiet instructions without talking down to him. When a little boy wandered in, dragging a broken toy car, she dried her hands and knelt to eye level, promising to perform surgery on it after dinner. The boy threw his arms around her without hesitation. Watching her, Keanu felt something in his chest loosen, like a knot finally beginning to untie. Later, when the food line opened, they stood side by side, scooping rice and sauce onto plastic plates. Kids bounced on their toes, adults mumbled thanks. To keep them entertained, he slipped into a playful rhythm, making exaggerated martial arts moves with the serving spoon, pretending to guard the meatballs like a movie bodyguard. The children squealed with laughter, copying his slow-motion kicks and dramatic dodges. "You ever done this before?" one little girl asked between giggles. "You move like the guy my uncle watches on TV." Rosa shot him a sideways look, curious. He grinned and bowed slightly. "Maybe I've just watched too many movies," he said. The girl accepted his answer easily, already distracted by the pudding cups at the end of the table. The mood shifted when a tall, sharply dressed man strode in, the smell of expensive cologne cutting through the aroma of tomato sauce. He carried his phone in front of him, camera already recording as he moved along the line, narrating loudly. "Back again at the shelter, feeding the less fortunate," he said into the lens. "Remember to like and share, kindness is viral." Volunteers stiffened. The director of the shelter forced a polite smile. Rosa's face went pale, then rigid. "That's Diego," she muttered to Keanu. "My ex." Diego spotted her and beamed as if they were old friends. "Rosie, still here, huh? You're amazing, really, such a big heart." His eyes flicked down her body with a smirk that made the compliment sting. "And big everything else." He laughed at his own joke, angling his phone to catch her reaction. Rosa's fingers tightened around the serving spoon, knuckles white. "Turn the camera off, Diego," she said quietly. "You're making people uncomfortable." He rolled his eyes, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "Relax, I'm helping. My followers love this charity stuff." His gaze slid to Keanu, taking in the cheap apron, the worn jacket. "New boyfriend?" he asked, voice dripping with disbelief. "Thought you swore off losers after me." The kids in line shifted uneasily, sensing the tension. Keanu felt his jaw clench, the familiar urge to put someone through a wall flaring hot. Before he could speak, Rosa did. "You weren't a loser because you were poor, Diego," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You were a loser because you used people's pain as a backdrop for your selfies." Diego's smile faltered. "Careful," he hissed. "You really think anyone decent is going to choose you? Look at yourself, Rosa. Men like him." He jabbed a finger at Keanu. "They stick around just long enough to get a warm bed and a free meal. No one falls in love with broke fat girls unless they're desperate." The words landed like blows. For a split second, Rosa's eyes shimmered with old hurt, old humiliation. Keanu stepped forward, apron damp, hands curling into fists. "You need to leave," he said, his voice low, the easy warmth gone. The director appeared at his side, backing him up. "You've got your footage, Diego. We don't film here without permission. Out!" There was steel in her tone Rosa clearly admired. Diego scoffed, but when he looked around, he saw no admiration in the faces around him, only irritation and disgust. Without his flattering angles and trimmed clips, he was just a man unwelcome in a room full of people he claimed to help. "Fine," he snapped, shoving his phone into his pocket. He leaned in close to Rosa as he passed, voice dropping to a poisonous whisper. "Just remember what I said. Guys don't stay." Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him, the echo hanging heavy in the silence he left behind. They finished the evening on automatic, hands moving, smiles returning for the kids, but something in Rosa had gone a little quieter. When the last plate was washed and the lights dimmed in the common room, they sat at a metal table with 2 steaming mugs of tea, the shelter finally still around them. Rosa stared into her cup, then lifted her eyes to his. The bravery she'd shown with Diego was still there, but now it was laced with an old fear. "Kai," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" He nodded, throat tight. "Are you really just passing through?" she went on. "Or are you going to disappear like everyone else once you've had enough of my charity and my baggage?" Her voice broke on the last word, but she didn't look away. It was the kind of question that split a man right down the middle. He wanted to tell her everything, that his name was Kai, that his face was on buses and billboards, that this whole messy, beautiful day was born from a selfish test. He opened his mouth, desperate to give her an honest promise he wasn't sure he could keep. At that exact moment, something vibrated against his ribs. He froze. He'd forgotten about the cheap phone Miguel had insisted he carry in case you get into real trouble. Rosa heard it too. "You can take it," she said, forcing a small smile. He fumbled it out of his pocket, thumb slipping. The call answered itself on speaker. Miguel's anxious voice burst into the quiet room, far too loud. "Mr. Reeves, we have a problem. Someone thinks they spotted you near the park. Call me back now." The name hung in the air like a gunshot. Rosa's eyes widened, her fingers tightening around the mug. Very slowly, she looked from the phone to his face, 100 questions crashing into one stunned, whispered word. "Reeves." The mug rattled against the metal table as Rosa set it down too fast. Tea sloshed over the rim, burning her fingers, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on him, wide and disbelieving. "Reeves," she repeated, as if the name itself tasted wrong. "Like Keanu Reeves, the actor." He swallowed, throat suddenly dry. "Rosa, listen." "No," she scraped her chair back, the screech slicing through the quiet room. "You listen." Her breath came hard and shallow, like she'd been running. "You walked into my life pretending to be hungry, pretending to be lost, and you're him." She jabbed a finger at his chest, as if an invisible poster were printed there. "Do you have any idea how insane that sounds from my side of the table?" He rose slowly, hands open. "I didn't come here to hurt you, I swear. I needed to know if someone could care about me without all the noise, without that." He gestured vaguely toward the world outside, the red carpets and billboards only they could see. "My real name felt like a wall, so I took it down." Her laugh was short and sharp. "You didn't take anything down, you built a stage." Her voice wobbled, but her gaze stayed fixed on his. "You watched me feed you, watched those kids hug you, watched my disgusting ex try to rip me apart, and the whole time you were what? Running a social experiment for your lonely rich guy crisis." The room seemed to shrink around them. Behind the kitchen door, a dish clanged, then fell quiet again, the staff instinctively giving them space. Guilt surged so strong it made him nauseous. "It started as a test," he admitted, forcing the words out. "But it stopped feeling like that the moment you split your sandwich with me. That wasn't research, Rosa. That was the first time in months I felt seen, not as a headline, as a man." He took a step closer. "Everything I said to you was real. The jokes, the stories, defending you today, that was me, not the actor, me." Her shoulders trembled, fighting between wanting to believe and needing to protect the last fragile piece of herself. "You chose the one person in this place who already feels like a joke every time she gets on a scale," she said quietly. "Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and hear people betting if the chair will hold you? To hear my own mother say I'd be pretty if I just lost a little. And now I find out that the only man who's looked at me like I was more than my body was, in costume." Her voice cracked on the last word. He reached out on instinct, then stopped himself, hand hovering uselessly in the space between them. "You were never a joke to me," he said. "I was the joke. A grown man so scared of being used that he lied to the only honest person he'd met in years." Her eyes glistened. She blinked the tears back as if they were a weakness she'd sworn off. "At least Diego was honest about being a jerk," she whispered. "You looked me in the face while I told you things I've never told anyone, and you let me do it to a stranger. You let me fall for a name that doesn't even exist." The word fall hit him harder than any stunt punch. "Rosa," he said, soft, stunned. "Don't," she cut in. "Don't you dare say my name like you own it." She yanked off her apron and dropped it on the table, breathing hard. "I can survive being invisible. I can even survive being mocked. But I don't think I can survive being someone's lesson." She turned and walked toward the exit. Panic flared in his chest. He hurried after her, ignoring the questioning look from the shelter director. The hallway felt too narrow, the fluorescent lights too bright. "Please," he said, following her through the doors and into the cool night. "Give me a chance to fix this." The street outside was mostly empty, the sky washed purple by the city glow. Rosa wrapped her arms around herself as if suddenly cold. "You can't fix a lie by explaining it better," she said without turning. "You say you wanted to be loved for who you are, so did I, but you got to choose your costume. I never did." Her voice shook now, anger and grief braided together. "All my life, men have either ignored me or wanted to use me to prove they're not shallow. You know, date the fat girl, get some points for being deep." She let out a ragged breath. "Congratulations, Keanu. You just invented the deluxe celebrity version." His phone buzzed again in his hand, Miguel's name flashing on the screen. Security, agents, contracts, schedules, all of it pressing in from the world he'd tried to step away from. He hit decline without looking. "I'm not here for points," he said. "I'm here because the thought of going back to my house, my life, without seeing you again makes my chest hurt. I'm here because when Diego talked to you like that, I wanted to break his nose, not for the cameras, but because no one gets to make you smaller than you are." She finally faced him, tears shining on her cheeks. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "You know 2 days of my life, a sandwich, a shift, a disaster of an ex. I'm not some pure-hearted angel sent to fix your loneliness. I'm tired, I'm stubborn, I eat my feelings. Sometimes I hate my own reflection so much I turn the lights off to brush my teeth." Her voice grew fiercer. "And I needed you to be real with me if we were going to be anything at all." He stepped closer, rain beginning to sting the air between them. "Then let me be real now. My name is Keanu. I have more money than I know what to do with. I also eat cereal for dinner and talk to my plants like they're my roommates. I've lost people I loved. I'm scared all the time that if anyone gets close, they'll either leave or sell the story to a magazine. And I haven't felt this pulled to someone in a very long time." His voice dropped raw. "I know I don't deserve your trust. But I want to earn it, without the lie, without the test, just me." For a heartbeat, he thought he saw something soften in her expression, some tiny door creaking open. Then she shook her head, tears spilling over. "You can't just ask me to jump from a cliff I spent years climbing away from," she said. "Not when the ground under me still feels like it's moving." A car turned the corner, headlights flaring, slowing when it spotted them. Miguel's sedan. Keanu's past and present rolled toward him on 4 wheels. Rosa took a step back. "Go," she said, voice flat with exhaustion. "Go back to your life, make your movies, date someone who knows how to walk in heels at your premieres. I'll be fine." She forced a brittle smile. "I was fine before Kai. I'll remember that." He opened his mouth, a dozen protests crashing together on his tongue. But Miguel was already stepping out of the car, scanning the street with worried eyes. The spell snapped. Rosa turned away, walking quickly down the sidewalk, pink dress fading into the city's shadows. He watched until she turned the corner and disappeared. Miguel touched his shoulder lightly. "Sir, we need to get you somewhere safe. There are rumors online already." Keanu didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the empty street where Rosa had vanished, the echo of her words hanging heavier than any headline. For the first time since he'd put on the worn-out jacket, he felt truly, terrifyingly exposed, not because the world might see him, but because someone who had finally seen straight through him had chosen to walk away. He slid into the car like a man much older than he was, the shelter's dim lights receding in the mirror. As Miguel pulled into traffic, Keanu closed his eyes, one harsh truth pounding in his head with every passing streetlight. He had found the one person who might love him for nothing, and he might have destroyed that chance before it had even begun. The next morning, the world tried to yank him back the way a riptide drags swimmers under. His agent's voice exploded through the living room speakers on a conference call, half panic, half opportunity. "We've got blurry photos of you near some rundown neighborhood, tabloids sniffing around about a secret project, fans arguing whether it's actually you. We can spin this. Homeless role research, gritty new image method acting, pick a narrative and we'll lock it in." Keanu stood by the window in an old t-shirt and sweatpants, hair still uneven from his disguise. The city sprawled beneath him, glass and steel and stories he'd only just begun to see up close. "No narrative," he said quietly. "There's no movie, no project. I was there because I wanted to be there." On the other end, silence crackled, followed by a disbelieving scoff. "You went undercover as a poor guy for fun? Keanu, you realize how bad that sounds if it gets out." He flinched, Rosa's voice echoed in his mind. I'm not some lesson. He could already imagine the headlines if the full story leaked. Memes, think pieces, people like Rosa turned into punchlines again. Then make sure it doesn't get out, he said. At least not her part. No names, no faces, no shelter. If anyone digs, they'll hit a wall. His agent groaned about impossible and career suicide, but Keanu was done playing his own PR team. When the call finally ended, the apartment felt too big and too quiet. Across town, Rosa's world was anything but quiet. The cafeteria buzzed with lunchtime chatter, trays clattering, nurses trading gossip over lukewarm coffee. Rosa moved through it on muscle memory, ladling soup, forcing smiles that never reached her eyes. Their old, flickering TV in the corner played a daytime talk show on low volume. She wasn't listening until she heard his laugh. That deep, familiar sound she'd come to recognize in just 2 days. Her hand jerked, hot soup splashed onto her wrist. She hissed, set the ladle down, and turned. On screen, Keanu sat on a sleek couch, wearing a dark suit, posture relaxed but eyes shadowed. The host, all teeth and practiced concern, leaned forward. There are rumors online that you've been seen in some unexpected places lately, he said. People say you're filming a secret documentary at shelters, going incognito around the city. Care to share what you've been up to? Rosa's coworker nudged her. Hey, is that your guy? You love his movies. The words stung more than they should have. She watched Keanu take a slow breath. He could have smiled, could have tossed out a charming line and turned it all into a marketing campaign. Instead, he looked down at his hands for a moment before meeting the host's eyes. I've met a lot of people this year, he said. Some of them are fighting battles most of us don't see. I wanted to understand their world a little better, not as research, not for a role, just as a human being who's pretty bad at making friends. The audience chuckled softly. He didn't smile. But it was a mistake to think I could walk into people's lives in disguise and not cause damage, he continued. They didn't consent to being part of some celebrity experiment. That's on me. The host blinked, clearly thrown. So there is no project. No cameras, no script, just me messing up. Keanu shifted on the couch, nerves visible even through the TV's soft focus. I met someone who reminded me what kindness looks like when there's nothing to gain, and I lied to her about who I was because I was scared that if she knew it would ruin everything. Turned out the lie ruined it instead. The studio audience was silent now, hanging on every word. Rosa stood rooted to the spot, a slice of bread still in her hand. The host, sensing ratings gold, pressed. Is this about a woman? Are you saying you fell in love? The crowd let out a collective gasp and a few giggles. Keanu gave a half smile, sad around the edges. I'm saying I hurt someone who didn't deserve it, he answered. And if she's watching this, I want her to know I'm sorry, not the polite PR kind of sorry, the kind where you wake up at 3 in the morning because the sound of her walking away is stuck in your head. He hesitated, then added, she'll know who she is, that's enough. Rosa's coworker sighed dramatically. Imagine being the woman he's talking about, she said, swooning over the counter. Girl hit the jackpot. Rosa set the bread down before her hands started to shake. Jackpot. That was what Diego would call it, what half the internet would call it if they ever saw her beside him. They wouldn't see a woman who worked double shifts and patched broken toys with tape and hope. They'd see a punchline upgraded to a headline. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of her scrubs. A message from an unknown number flashed on the screen. Rosa, it's the shelter director. We need to talk. Someone offered a big donation in your name, but there's a catch. Her heart dropped into her stomach. An hour later, she sat in the shelter office, the same place where she'd once filled out a volunteer form with shaking hands, praying they wouldn't turn her away. The director slid a folder across the desk. Anonymous donor, she said. Wants to cover our rent for 2 years, upgrade the kitchen, fund a tutoring program for the kids. It would change everything for us. Her voice softened. He also requested one condition, that you stay on staff, maybe even take a paid coordinator position. Rosa didn't open the folder. Her throat was already tight. Let me guess, she said. Tall, dark hair, sad eyes, talks to plants. The director's mouth twitched. He didn't leave a name, but I'm not blind. She leaned back, studying Rosa. I told him we don't do strings-attached donations. He said it wasn't a string. It was a hope. If you said no, the money would still come, every cent. Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, torn down the center. The shelter needed this. The kids needed this. Yet the idea that his guilt, his love, whatever it was, could be measured in dollars made her stomach twist. Why would he insist on me staying? she asked, knowing the answer and hating it. "Because you run half this place on willpower and caffeine," the director said simply. "And because you've been walking around like someone unplugged your heart and forgot to plug it back in." She paused. "Look, I don't care about his movies. I care that he showed up, put on an apron, and washed dishes without announcing it on Instagram. That says more to me than his bank account does." She nudged the folder closer. "This isn't about him buying you. It's about him using what he has to fix what he can. You get to decide whether that matters." Rosa opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were printed emails from lawyers, a breakdown of repairs, a handwritten note on plain paper at the bottom. "I won't come back unless you ask," it read. "This place is yours, not mine, but if you'll let me, I'd like to help keep the lights on." K. Her chest ached. She imagined him in his huge apartment, alone, sending lawyers to do what he hadn't managed with words. Was it repentance or just another grand gesture from a man who'd never learned the quiet way to say, "I care"? That night she stayed late to scrub the dining tables, letting the repetitive motion steady her thoughts. Outside, the wind howled down the alley, rattling the old windows. She was stacking chairs when she heard shouting, men's voices, a crash, a child's frightened cry. Rosa dropped the chair and ran to the back door. In the narrow alley behind the shelter, two teenage boys were shoving each other, anger already past the point of reason. One of them she recognized, Lewis, a regular at the shelter, all sharp edges and softer eyes. The other was older, taller, reeking of cheap beer. Between them, a little girl clung to a torn backpack, eyes wide with terror. "Stop!" Rosa yelled, stepping between them without thinking. "Not here, not in front of her." The taller boy laughed, mean and glassy-eyed. "Move, lady, this doesn't concern you." His hand swung out, pushing her shoulder harder than he meant to. She stumbled against the wall, breath knocked from her lungs. Before she could recover, footsteps thundered into the alley. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Hey, that's enough." Keanu, in jeans and a plain hoodie, no disguise beyond the shadows, moved faster than any camera had ever captured. He wedged himself between the boys, one arm blocking the taller guy, the other guiding Lewis and the girl back. "You want to throw punches, you don't do it near kids," he said, voice low and controlled. The older boy swung at him, wild and clumsy. Instinct and years of choreographed fights took over. Keanu dodged, grabbed the kid's wrist, and twisted just enough to send him stumbling away without real harm. The boy cursed, clutching his arm. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might lunge again. Then he caught sight of Keanu's face under the alley light, eyes widening in sudden recognition. "No way," he breathed, anger dissolving into stunned disbelief. You're that guy from the movies." Rosa pressed a hand to her bruised shoulder, watching the scene with her heart hammering. Lewis clung to her side. The little girl buried her face in Rosa's hip, sobbing quietly. Keanu didn't break eye contact with the older boy. "And you're going to walk away right now," he said calmly, "because you're not actually a bad kid, you're just scared and stupid tonight. Go home before I call someone who has real cuffs." Something in his tone cut through the drunk bravado. The boy spat on the ground, muttered a final curse, and jogged off into the dark. Silence rushed into the space he left. Only the girl's sniffling and Rosa's uneven breathing remained. Keanu turned then, finally looking at Rosa. The alley light caught the bruise already blooming under her collarbone where she'd hit the wall. His jaw tightened. "Are you hurt?" he asked, taking a step toward her, hand half raised. She met his gaze, walls flying back up around the part of her that wanted badly to lean into his concern. "I'm fine," she said, voice steady even as her shoulder throbbed. "The kids are fine, that's what matters." Lewis looked between them, still shaking. "He was gonna take her bag," he mumbled. "I tried to stop him." Keanu rested a hand lightly on the boy's head. "You did good," he said, "but next time you yell for Rosa first, okay? She's scarier than both of us." The girl hiccuped a tiny laugh, tension easing just a fraction. Inside, when the kids were settled with Coco and an old cartoon playing on the shelter's tiny TV, Rosa found Keanu waiting by the sink, hands shoved in his pockets, clothes damp from the light rain that had started to fall. There was no audience now, no talk show host, no camera crew, just the hum of the broken fridge and the drip of a leaky faucet. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly, moving to check her shoulder in the reflection of the darkened window. "I never asked you to come back." "I know," he replied. I heard shouting while I was walking by. The rest, I couldn't pretend I didn't see. He hesitated. I also couldn't pretend I don't still care what happens to you. She kept her eyes on her own blurred reflection. You threw money at the problem. You threw yourself at a drunken teenager. What's next, Keanu? You going to throw your fame at me too? Stand outside my door with a boombox and a press release. Her words were biting, but they hit a tremor he didn't miss. He stepped closer, carefully leaving a respectful distance between them. I didn't donate for you to forgive me, he said. I donated because this place matters, because those kids matter, and because when I think about the world existing without you in it, doing what you do here, it feels wrong. He paused, searching for the right words. You're allowed to hate me. You're allowed to never speak to me again. I'll still keep the lights on. She turned then, eyes shining with a complicated storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, reluctant gratitude, something softer buried deep. You think that makes this easier? She asked. Knowing you're capable of all this and you still chose to lie. He didn't look away. No, he said. I think it makes it harder for both of us. He swallowed. But I'm done hiding, Rosa, from you, from myself, from the ugly parts of this whole situation. So here's the truth. I want another chance, not to be your savior or your jackpot. Just to be the guy who does dishes next to you and tries not to mess it up this time. She stared at him long enough that the hum of the fridge and the cartoon laughter from the next room seemed to grow louder. Finally, she exhaled, shoulders sagging, eyes closing for a brief, exhausted moment. What if I give you that chance? She whispered. And the world finds out? What happens when people start taking pictures of us in the grocery store? When my body becomes a trending topic? When Diego sells his version of the story, and I'm suddenly either a gold digger or an inspiration porn meme? I barely survived the looks I get on the bus. I don't know if I can survive the whole internet. He flinched, he'd thought about that, but hearing it in her voice made it real in a way his imagination never had. Then I'll stand in front of you, he said, voice steady. Every time. I'll use every microphone they hand me to make sure they know you're not a prop or a lesson. You're a person who was kind to me when I didn't deserve it. And if they can't handle us together, that's their weakness, not yours. Her eyes searched his, weighing years of insecurities against the raw honesty in his face. You're asking me to walk into a fire with you, she said. He nodded. I'm asking you to let me walk through it with you, not as a test, not as a movie, as something terrifying and real. The question hung between them, heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. From the next room, the little girl's laughter rose again, pure and bright, cutting through the tension. Rosa glanced toward the doorway, then back at him, the battle still raging behind her eyes. Come back tomorrow, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Same time, no cameras, no lawyers, no money talk, just you, she swallowed. If I'm here, we'll talk. If I'm not, you'll have your answer. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. As he turned to leave, heart pounding with equal parts hope and fear, he knew one thing with sudden, startling certainty. Facing 1,000 stunt explosions had never scared him as much as the simple possibility that, when he walked through that door tomorrow, the woman who had finally seen him might be gone.